Got to turn the mic volume on. I apologize. I'm a shipcam journalist. I am not a YouTube star. But thank you for joining this live broadcast to give you an update on the salvage attempts, the latest salvage attempts, and the new plan to unstick the mega container ship ever given from the Suez Canal. A new operation that is about to start. And that operation is called by some salvage experts Operation Backtwist. But before we get to that, we are going to give you a recap of what's happened since our last broadcast yesterday evening with Dr. Sal Mercagliano, which you can find on the gcam.com homepage. So we just got this update from Bernard Schultz Ship Management, their media representatives. They say another attempt to refloat the vessel earlier today, the 26th of March, was not successful. Smit Salvage Team, that's the Dutch salvage team in charge of the operation, is on board, and they confirm that there will be 2 additional tugs with 220 and 240-ton bollard pull. We'll explain what that is in a moment. Arriving on the 28th in 2 days, Sunday, to assist in refloating the ship. The focus is now on dredging to remove sand and mud from around the port side of the vessel's bow. A specialized suction dredger will explain that as well, which can shift 2,000 cubic meters of material every hour. Arrived on site yesterday to support the ongoing dredging operations. Arrangements are also being made for high-capacity pumps to reduce the water levels in the forward void space of the vessel and the bow thruster room. No pollution or cargo damage is reported at this time. So that's the latest update. But what does that mean? And how long will it take to free this thing? And when can we start the global logistics start to resume to normal? When can we get ships through this Suez Canal? That's what I hope to answer. Unfortunately, the answer is not straightforward. The answer I gave BBC, Cheddar, Al Jazeera, and a number of other news outlets I've been talking to, New York Times yesterday, continues today, and the word moving forward is uncertainty. We are uncertain how long this is going to take. We're uncertain what ships are affected. We are uncertain what cargo is on these ships. We discussed briefly that the biggest unicorn in Silicon Valley, the most profitable, the Tesla of the last 2 years, is a company called Flexport, and those guys are killing it. I wish I could buy shares. Forget Airbnb and DoorDash and these other stock IPOs. I want to own Flexport because they are digitizing, figuring out what containers are where, because our new supply chain is just in time. So we don't have big warehouses anymore. These ships are the warehouses. And if one little element for a engine for a German car manufacturer doesn't arrive on time, it could shut down the whole production plant of that car manufacturer. There could be critical respirators and supplies on this ship, and ship's backed up, we don't know. And very few people have an idea except Flexport. So that's that. Getting back to the salvage. The thing that sticks out in my mind, first and foremost, is this ship is flooding. Yes, the ship is flooding. Arrangements are also being made for high-capacity pumps to reduce the water levels in the forward void space of the vessel and the bow thruster. That's the official report. As a ship captain, I'm telling you, that Mideast, the answer is it's flooding. Now, is the flooding bad? Does not sound like it. Is it a game changer? Hopefully not. Sorry, but I'm going to bring up a picture of the ship here and show you kind of what that means. Hold on one second. Let me change this angle, get my face out of the way, and find a nice picture of grounded vessel. Here we go. This one should work. To show you what this means. So this is the bow of the vessel. And if we scroll in here, this is the forward void space by the bulbous bow inside. And you see these two small marks right here. Those are bow thrusters. So they push water port and starboard, and they're what's supposed to, when the bow gets pushed off by wind, they can push the ship back and forth. But because it's a mechanical space, these are propellers. So there are propellers in there that turn. I guess I should have brought up a picture of a bow thruster to show you. Here we go. Let me find a good one. Here. All right. Wikipedia bow thruster. So this ship here that you're seeing is tiny compared to the one ever given, but you see the propellers that can push, and here's the little symbol on the side of the ship so the tugs know where those bow thrusters are. So these are leaking. I don't think a lot of water, but they did say high capacity pumps. So whatever pumps they have nearby are not enough to discharge the water that is leaking through the bow thrusters and in the forward void space. Right now, it does not sound like they're concerned, but it is something that the salvers are paying close attention to. And we are also told by our editor, Mike Schuler here, that some water ingress is limited to those two spaces. So a ship is compartmentalized, right? They started this with the Titanic. They're watertight bulkheads and spaces, and you can close watertight doors. So if one little room floods, it does not flood the entire ship. So not a big deal, but just goes to show the worsening conditions. The longer this ship is there, the more problems like this start to develop. More spaces could start to flood. More structural problems could start themselves. So what's their plan? Their plan is what some salvers are calling Operation Backtwist. What is Operation Backtwist? Well, let's bring up another photo of this ship. All right, so as we can see, it's wedged in here on the bow and on the stern. See if I can zoom in. Right, so this ship was going down the canal. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it was going down the canal at a high rate of speed, 13 knots. The wind pushed the bow over. The helmsman either didn't react in time. There's also a question about bow suction and other hydrodynamic issues, but the result is the bow wedged in right here to the side of the canal, and the momentum of the stern pushed it and wedged it in to the port side. The previous plan was they were first going to dredge this ship. Get the ballast water out of the ship. So if we bring up another picture of the ship, you can see how top heavy all these containers are. Very heavy. To compensate for that top heaviness and prevent the ship from capsizing, you have massive tanks down under the waterline. And this red stuff's all supposed to be underwater. So going aground pushed the bow up, but you see, before we could only see red in the front section. Now we're starting to see red in the stern. That means they are discharging this ballast water, huge heavyweight ballast water in the bottom. And then they use these tugs to pull it out, and it didn't work. The next plan was to get in tank barges and mini tankers in there and suck the fuel oil out to further raise the ship. For some reason, that was not mentioned in the report. Our thought is they have abandoned that plan and they're going to Operation Backtwist. So what is Operation Backtwist? Well, they are going to suck out and cut sand using backhoes and excavation equipment from the land, definitely from the bow and possibly the stern. But they are also, in addition to those land-based excavators, they're getting in suction dredges. And I don't know if we have a picture of the suction dredge that they are using, but I will show you the Wikipedia similar suction dredge, what that looks like. So this is a very small suction dredge that on Wikipedia. A suction dredge is basically a floating vacuum cleaner, and there are various types. They're cutter suction dredges, which actually have a drill bit on the front that rotates and can cut into rock as this pipe sucks down the whatever is on the seafloor. So they hope to reach under with these suction dredges, and I don't know if there's another picture. This is a larger suction dredge ship, and you see this little section coming down. gets pushed under the ship and it starts sucking up the sea bottom. Suction dredging is used all the time around the world. There's constantly silt coming into places like harbor entrances. Mississippi River is famous. They have a lot of dredges down there run by the Army Corps of Engineers. So there's a lot of competency in dredging. It's a well-known fact, and that's what they're going to do first. They're going to stick these basically floating vacuum cleaners under the ship and suck out the sand to hopefully free this. Then they're going to wait for high tide. Monday through Wednesday, we get the highest tides for the upcoming period. So hopefully they get enough sand sucked out and moved from the land to pull it. But the other problem is these tugs are tiny. So Mike Schuler got us the dimension, the statistics on these tugboats owned by the Suez Canal Authority. Their largest tugboat you can see right here, and I don't know if there is I know there's a better picture somewhere of this. Here we go. This larger, the Baraka 1. The Baraka 1 right here is a rather large, it's actually an offshore anchor handling vessel. It's meant to handle anchors for big oil rigs and such. But this thing has a 160-ton bollard pull. So the Suez Canal has two vessels of around 150, 160-ton bollard pull. And this is one of them, but they need more. So they're getting more bollard pull tugs into the area. But remember, they got to get these tugs in, but they have to find ones that are in the Persian Gulf to come this way and the Mediterranean to come this way because they can't get around the vessels. So that's the big logistical problem. And how do you get these tugs, big enough tugs, in advance? And you think, well, I think it's ridiculous that the Suez Canal's regular tugboats are only around 50 bollard tugs, where the biggest tugboats in the world now have 300 tons. And in every major container port that handles these megaships, they're required to have these tugs that have hundreds of bollard pulls. If you talk to the tugboat companies, they've been building like crazy the last 10 years to get ready for these megaships. And they're needed because of the weight. We have an excellent article by George Livingston that talks about the sheer size of these vessels. Let me see if I can bring it up here. Do supersized ships create supersized problems? By Captain George Livingston, who is a San Francisco Bay pilot. He has piloted these large ships in very restricted areas. And he said not long ago, 10 years from now, we had 10,000 TEU ships, only 10 years ago. Now we have 24,000 TEU ships like this Ever Given. And while, those 10,000 TEU ships were only 965 about average, less than 1,000 feet long or less than 300 meters. Today's behemoth, like the Ever Given, is 400 meters or 1,300 feet. So they've gone in significant, what's that? I don't know, 25% larger, 30% larger. But it's not just about the size. Size is not all that matters, right? What's very interesting, and Captain Livingston brings up, is the weight of these vessels. So at 10,000 TEU ships like we had 10 years ago, not too long ago, it was approximately 55,000 dead weight tons displacement. If you put a ship in a bathtub, all that water would come out. That 55,000 tons would come out. Enough, the same amount of water as the ship weighs is displaced. But the 400-meter container ship, like the Ever Given, is almost 200,000 tons. So while these ships are 25% longer, they are 400 times heavier. 400. So these are the immense weights involved. And this is why they had to get the ballast out. They got to get the fuel out. And then they're going to start to move these heavy containers. But as I talked about in a previous video, This is a Tetris game. Now, I'm going to pause very quickly for a word from our sponsor. I won't be long, but we got to do this. Preventing Black Swans is Black Sail AI maritime platform that makes your operation safer, greener, and disruption-free. A bunch of people have asked me, what is the Black Sail? It's an MIT startup. Basically, my car, my Volvo, if I was to fall asleep at the wheel or have a heart attack in my car on the highway, it slows down the car and pulls it to the side of the road. Black Sail basically does the same thing. It's not autonomous ship. It's semi-autonomous. When the captain's having a problem, he can press the button and the AI can take over. So this could really help in a situation like this. So that's sponsor, blksail.ai. Moving back to these behemoth, the weight involved. It's not just the weight, but that weight, that 400% more, that 200,000 ton deadweight is pressing down on the sides of the ship. And the BBC has an excellent graphic here that I can bring up in a second that shows the problem. So you got the tugboats, and these tugboats are not scale. They're actually in real life smaller than that. All right, and you got the stern aground or almost aground or could be aground at low tide, and you got the bow firmly aground. If you can see, try to zoom in here so you can see it. And underneath this is all of the, sorry, I lost it, is the Suez Canal, this water here. And this is the suction dredger trying to suck out around from the bow here to lighten the load. And then they're eventually going to have to get a crane. I don't think that this is going to work. There's been a lot of talk about a shoreside crane. I don't think a shoreside crane is going to work because it would have to reach. Again, this is a 400-meter ship. That crane would have to reach out 200 meters to the center. And the center is the most critical spot. All right? More important than the bow and the stern. So I'm going to come to that. But I also want to bring up, this is not the first container ship that had serious problems. We had a Megaship stuck in the Elbe River a couple years ago, but we also had the MOL Comfort. It was a giant mega container ship built in Japan, just like the Ever Given. And that ship cracked in half in heavy seas. It was different. This is not a heavy seas, obviously. The Comfort was in heavy seas. Heavy seas create an additional stress. But the point is, after that, they did a lot of forensics on the steel of the vessel. Now, I'm going to bring in some aids. I've been designing a Uneg Mariner knife to do some forging with my son, and I hopefully get a patent on it. But I have when you get into knife making, you wouldn't believe the different types of steel. It's a CPN 535VN, very, very expensive steel. And some steel bends more than others. Some holds an edge better. Some are easier to sharpen. I mean, when you get into knife making, you find there are so many different types of steel and components in the steel that do very thing. And then you obviously have stainless steels and titanium and composites, and it gets nuts. Well, the same thing happens on the ship. A ship has basic steel. It doesn't even have stainless steel. The paint prevents it from rusting, but it is still steel. And in a knife, I don't know if you've seen Forged in Fire, you get this semi-malleable steel, and then you got to get it red hot, and you put it in oil and cool it down very rapidly, and it hardens the steel. So it's very hard to bend, right? That is not good for a ship. On a ship, you want bending, right? So pretend this is a ship. As a ship hits a mega wave, the bow will go up and the stern will come down. Bow will come up and the stern will come down. And I don't know, there is video of what this looks like. Yeah, I'll bring this up here for you. Firefox video capture. Oh, it's making me watch an ad. I can't watch an ad. I don't have time for that. All right, display capture. I will get in another. What it looks like, look in the inside, looking down the side of a ship in a storm. And this looks like it could be scary, but it is not. So I can fast forward. This is uploaded by Sergey Petrov. And this is looking down from the inside of a large container ship. And you can see as the steel starts to bend, and that is good. All right, it's a little scary to experience for the first time, but it is good. You want the steel to bend. But there are various quality of steels, and there's a big debate. You know, this steel is bad, this steel is good, because you want it to be able to bend, and you want it to be able to continually bend as it hit waves for years, decades even, right? And it's not just one bend, it's a sideway bend. Sometimes you might hit the ocean like this. But what happens is as it flexes, it starts to get stiff, and eventually, that's how you know a ship is about to crack. When it stops bending, it's very stiff right before the crack, because a stiff thing cracks, right? But there are various forces on a ship. And if we go back to this BBC view, right here, the center is where a lot of the heavier containers are. As this water line recedes in low tide, and there's about a 5 to 7 foot difference between high tide and low tide in the Suez, this ship starts, this water, you know, goes away, and this ship starts to bend. Damn it, I'm losing my, oh, I'm on the wrong screen. Video capture. So I'm going to bring it here. This is the ship. It's caught on one side bank, and here's the other side of the bank. So as the water goes, it starts to bend inward. That's not, the bending is not bad in itself, but what you have to understand is this is designed architecturally to have a cushion of water underneath and support the hull. So when this bends, it's not free. It's not totally out of the air, and neither will the given. But if you are caught on the bow and the stern, there's nothing supporting that center. And the more it flexes, you have the possibility of creating micro cracks. And if it cracks, you could have pollution and a much larger salvage. And there are various types of metal fatigue. But these new computers have designed these ships to be really strong, but use the least amount of steel and the lowest quality steel available. Lower quality steel is cheaper. Cheaper ships means that the shipping companies make more money. So there's been a lot of computer-aided design to find thinner hulls and use cheaper steel. It's just basic economics. And there are different types of this bending action. You know, first you have local bending. So right now there's an immense amount of local bending at the tip, the bulbous bow. So there's a lot of strength at the tip and less back aft, right? That's local bending. Global bending is that hogging and sagging. So when a ship is like this, that's called hogging. And when it goes like this, it's called sagging. And, you know, they have the same basic, there's a lot of tension in the center of that ship during that operation. So that's global bending. There's also buckling. So inside, to help strengthen this and prevent excess bending, are these longitudinals. And they're welded right to the steel, right? So as it bends, these things are stronger and they're not going to bend as much. They still will bend. But buckling is when the longitudinals start to get compressed and start to crack. So that's buckling. And then there's shear force. So we talked about the force this way, but as you start to put tugs, this part of the steel can move that way with a tug, and this part, if there's a tug here, can move this way, right? So that shear force can create cracks down the center. So they're going to bring in these massive tugs, and these guys are experts. I'm not saying they can't do this without cracking. These guys are absolute experts, but they have to manage all this, and they're going to, if it doesn't work, they'll have to move these containers like a Tetris game to very carefully monitor all of these stresses. And then finally, the worst is what we talked about, fatigue. So there's local bending, global bending, buckling, shear forces, and then fatigue. If I keep bending this, it's going to break, right? It's going to break, and I don't have safety glasses, so I better not do that. and crack. And you start with micro cracks or wrong places like where the engine's connecting. And then that can lead to additional flooding like we are already seeing in the forward void space and the thruster room. And if a fuel tank cracks, you can have a pollution problem. And then the ship's not stable enough on itself. So you have to support the aft end and the back end. And worst case scenario, you end up with something like the MOL Comfort, which I don't have a picture up right in front of me. Let me bring that up. This is what the worst case scenario. You see it kept flexing and flexing until it cracked right down the center. And MO Comfort's not the only one. It more recently happened with the Wakashio in Mauritius, which ran aground, and after several days, it started to form cracks. See if we can find a good picture of the Wakashio. And, yep, it initially looked like this, right? And then it started looking like this with the mega cracks. And it caused fuel oil damage. A small crack started to come around, at this stress point with the shear forces here. And then eventually she cracked in two. So this is what Smith's on the scene to solve, and they're the best in the world. But Smith also was involved in this Wakashio and did not do this in time and was not able to save this ship. So they don't have 100% success rate. So that's what's happening. There's also reports out that the Egyptian government has asked the U.S. Navy for help. The U.S. Navy has a long history of salvage, long, proud history of salvage ops. The most famous salvers of the world are the Dutch. Der Captain there's a famous about the famous salvage tug of World War II. I don't know where, I don't think I have it. I wish I could pull it out. Let me see 1 second. Sorry, I should have had it there. I don't, but the Dutch are famous and the most famous salvage tug of the world. But in the American Navy, the most famous salver is a guy named Ellsberg. And Edward Ellsberg, Rear-Admiral Ellsberg, famously did the first major salvage of a submarine. And in World War II, he begged to go to Pearl Harbor to salvage the battleships and the aircraft carriers. But the U.S. Navy said, no, you can't. We need you in the Suez Canal. And so they sent him, and he was responsible for keeping the Suez Canal clear. And Ellsberg, his big thing was, in order to keep it clear, you need equipment in place. You need to keep this equipment in place. So his whole career, he went through the Navy and begging, pleading for large salvage tugs, big broad power salvage tugs, pumps and equipment, and all this stuff that Smith's just now trying to get in scene because the Suez Canal did not have it. And you could blame the Suez Canal for not having these big, strong bollard tugs, vessels in place, and bigger pumps and the barge cranes that can reach up and grab these containers. But it's a global problem. It's not just the Suez Canal. So the Navy has forgotten salvage too. They used to have salvage. They were active duty naval officers. They moved the few salvage tugs that we have, which are getting old, over to Military Sealift Command, which is doing an excellent job, but we don't have many of them. And then the embarrassment last year, the Bonehard Richard fire. First, the Navy had no idea with the salvage, so they called in the police boats. These tiny little boats put out this big fire. And eventually the big tugboat commercially, locally said, help us, let us help. And they had to get permission and were brought in to help put out this fire. But the San Diego is the Navy's most important port. They have $9 billion ships like the Zumwalt, destroyer and aircraft carriers. And San Diego does not have one fireboat with salvage capabilities. So if the best funded, biggest, strongest, and a Navy that learned the lessons over the years in World War I and World War II with Rear Admiral Ellsberg, and wrote the books and pleaded with politicians to get this salvage equipment to places like the salvage. And the Navy has base in Djibouti, right? But they don't have the salvage equipment or expertise, and they fail miserably with the Bonner Merchant. It was embarrassing. You have a port like this without a fireboat. Even LA Long Beach has a fireboat, an impressive one, but the U.S. Navy does not. So they've lost that expertise. So, Suez is asking the U.S. Navy, and I'm sure they're getting help from Royal Navy and other navies around the world, but a lot of this expertise is going in commercial hands with people like Smith, who, again, do an excellent job. But there's only so much they can do without the equipment there. And the equipment has to be there based on tariffs and rates and charging customers, the Amazon. When you get something from Amazon, you should have to pay 0.00001% of that should go to salvage equipment in places like Singapore Straits and Suez Canal. But it just does not happen. So make sure, again, we talked about steel quality. We talked about bending stresses, the possibility of this thing cracking. We talked about hogging and sagging and the tide going out and creating micro cracks, which could, hopefully not, I'm not trying to be alarmist, create much larger problems. But the longer this vessel is there, the more of these little problems will creep up. This is not a linear problem. The longer it is there on these rocks in this awkward position, it's an exponentially growing problem, not just for the salvage of the ship, but also for the world trade and logistics. Exponentially a growing problem. So we talked about suction drug, we talked about flooding, and we finally talk about Operation Backtwist. So Backtwist is very simple. Let me bring up the picture right here. All right, so again, they're dredging out the sand in the bow and the stern, and they're going to excavate as much as possible. Then they're getting their own two high bollard pull tugs like the Baraki here, and Smith's bringing in its own 200 bollard ton tugs, which are going to help a 220 bollard tug and a 240 bollard tug. So typically this vessel has at least 4, usually 6 when it comes into like Long Beach or something. So this isn't even enough tugs. It wouldn't even be allowed to come into port with 4 200, 250 bollard pull tugs, but it may be enough, hopefully, to free it, and they're just going to back twist this. One tug's going to pull, a bunch of tugs are going to pull this way, tugs are going to pull that way, and twist it out and move and tow it out of the canal. That is Operation Backtwist. Will it work? Will there be cracks? Will there be pollution? How long will it take? Again, the word of the day is uncertainty. If you want to know what it's like to navigate one of these ships in confined space, there's a series of articles from one of the best megaship pilots in the world, Captain George Livingston of the San Francisco Pilots, and he talks through the troubles he has as a ship captain piloting these megaships in a big port. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I will sign off now. I am Captain John Conrad, founder and CEO of G Captain,